we're moving on very quickly. We've moved from governance. We've moved from visibility to governance and to managing ourselves within the workplace in terms of stakeholder mapping, in terms of office politics, in terms of beyond the skills, what else do I need to harm myself with? So we are getting on the train of entrepreneurship. We are getting on the train of innovation. We are getting on the train of technology. I'm going to be introducing Bosun Tijani very quickly. Bosun Tijani is an entrepreneur, a co-founder and chief executive of Co-Creation Hub Nigeria, CC Hub. He is an innovation expert with over 15 years of experience, evangelizing an industry-wide shift to technology innovation, which has helped position startups as the anchor of the tech ecosystem in Nigeria. Bosun was named as one of the 100 most influential people on the continent by New Africa magazine. He received and initiated the visit of Mark Zuckerberg for the first time in Nigeria. I'm sure we're all familiar with the trip Facebook owner made to Nigeria a couple of years back. So Bosun was one of the people that initiated that move. That was in August 2016. In 2019, CC Hub acquired Kenya's iHub under Bosun's leadership. Before CC Hub, Tijani worked with International Trade Center, where he successfully led the development and deployment of a web marketing and information services program in Ghana and subsequently in Uganda and Kenya with record positive outputs. He is a fellow of the Center for Democracy and the Rule of Law at the Stanford University and an associate of the Desmond Tutu Leadership Followership. Join me in welcoming Bosun Tijani as he takes us through the world of entrepreneurship and innovation. Bosun, over to you.
Because these things are on autopilot now, so
yeah.
but the bugs are still there. Glad to be with you guys. I don't know if I'll be able to share my screen. If I can, I'm gonna try.
You should be able to
share your screen. Your co-host.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. I can see that there's quite a number of people online. Regardless of the profile of the people listening to this talk, I think there's absolutely something in it for you, regardless of where you sit at the moment. If you're leading an organization, this is even more relevant. But if you're not, I strongly believe that we all should be leaders in our own right, that wherever we find ourselves, there's opportunity for us to lead. And the unique thing as well is for those that are on the core, that are Nigerians or anyone from Africa, I strongly believe that the continent is in dire need of leaders in every corners of society, not necessarily leaders in terms of political leaders or people in government. But the way I'm going to start, because there's a lot of conversation around digital era, right? But one thing that has always been there is that digital, technology is just a continuation of technology as we've always known it. Of course, there are certain things that are unique about digital technology. But the exciting thing and the starting point that I think is important for everyone to take into consideration is what technology has always been to mankind. Technology has always almost been a helper of humanity, really. Technology gives us a unique opportunity to actually add value, to leapfrog, but also to drive productivity. This slide is meant to show us something in economics that is called total factor productivity. So if we happen to have some economics in the webinar, they probably will understand this, but I'll try to break it down. So if you take two countries and give them the same capital and probably the same human resource, for instance, and you ask them to say, they have the same weather condition, and you ask them to go in and be great in agriculture. There's something in economics that is called total factor productivity that, beyond those common factors of production that we apply to generate results, that there's something called technical efficiency that drives the superiority of the value and level of productivity that we can generate from any economy. So whether you want to take Nigeria and compare Nigeria to South Africa, which may not necessarily be a fair comparison in terms of the size of the country, the resources that is available to it. But if you take any two countries and you compare them, what really sets them apart is something in economics that is called technical efficiency. And technical efficiency really is quite simple. You can almost look at it as the gains that we make from applying technology, right? The gain that we make from applying science, the gain that we make from applying those things that are not readily available to everybody in the form of science and technology to improve the outcomes of everything that we put into producing something. And that can also be the outcomes of productivity level of any economy. And for a lot of people on the call today, what I've done here is to actually help see this in the light of modern day Africa and how people are applying technology to change the traditional sector. For those who may know the companies like Andela, for instance, and what Andela has done within the software development and software engineering space, in the last probably 6 or 7 years, you can recognize that as a company that has applied technology in the way they recruit, but also in the way they train and apply the expertise of the people that they train. Andela has done something that the bulk of our universities on the continent have not been able to do in a long, long time, which is really training young people en masse, helping them to become software engineers and placing them into high-paid jobs, which, and these are people that, they've not been to, some of them have not been to university, some of them took probably less than a year or two to learn. So you can see what Andela is doing in education, that's gone beyond the traditional way of training people, which would require them to come study for 4 years. It will require them to pay a lot of money to study. And perhaps not even all of them will be able to start to earn well in a short space of time. And if you apply the same thing into areas like agriculture, you can see what Twiga Food from Kenya or Farm Crowdy from Nigeria, what they're using technical efficiency to drive in the agricultural space on the continent. For those who may know the likes of LifeBank or Drugstock, you can see what they're doing in the public health space. Or Cobot 360 and Lori System as well, in terms of what they're doing around logistics, making it easier for us to be able to trade on the continent. You can see this pattern in so many places, even in things like finance, with what you see with Kuda, what you see with Ribi, but also in things like logistics, where you find Zipline again and LifeBank. You will find that all these people are applying technical efficiency, they're applying technology to drive better outcome, in the sectors in which they work. And by doing that, they're generating and contributing to economic prosperity for the African continent by producing better goods and services. So when you see people talk about digital era, it's not necessarily something that is falling out from somewhere that we've not always been aware of as humanity. I think we've always been aware of the fact that technology contributes to our ability to produce things better. Technology contributes to the level of productivity of any society. You take the more developed countries in the world, their ability to apply science and technology is really what is driving their uniqueness as a society. So once we get that, then you can begin to wrap your head around what is happening within the digital revolution. And I think for leaders, and the way I've described leaders, I hope this will cut across, both who are, presumably in the traditional leadership position, but also each one of us in any endeavor that we find ourselves. Then you begin to understand digital revolution differently. Digital revolution is literally just being driven by a new set of technology, modern day, what we used to call probably 5-10 years ago, emerging technology, because most of them are quite mature today. So you can't really call them emerging anymore. And what this digital revolution is bringing to the table is that computing power is a lot more affordable now, compared to probably 10, 15, 20 years ago. For most of us today, the mobile telephone that we carry actually have stronger computing power compared to some of the computers that were in existence 10, 15 years ago. So the affordability of computing power then makes this digital technology to be quite unique in their ability to do so many things, which I'll be happy to talk about later. But also you can find things around human-machine interaction. The ability of humans to interact with machines today has been built to a level where, you know, compared to just a few years ago, you will see that there's opportunity for us to not only revolutionize business, but society as a whole, because humans can now connect to machines a lot easier. Machines can connect to humans a lot easier. You know, in very well-structured society where there's good foundation for Internet of Things, you'll find that people can now control literally their entire home remotely, or people can control their car. You can control your refrigerator from anywhere in the world, really. And what that means is that our ability to connect to these things and machines remotely has been enhanced by this digital revolution. You can also find the same with automation. You know, some elements of automation can be found in manufacturing, but beyond that, a lot of people who have paid attention to robotics, for instance, the kind of things that we can do with robots today that typically you need humans to be able to do is ginormous. You know, things that we couldn't do before without us physically being there. Machines can now do them for us. But also access to information and democratization of knowledge. You know, I'll use an example here. I was at an event with the founders of Google a few years ago. And they were talking about, you know, their vision for Google and where they see Google being in another 5 to 10 years. And they mentioned that, you know, information is going to get to a stage where we actually don't need to say what we want before the information comes to us. You know, that information will recognize the things that we need. And before we actually call out for it, that the information that we need will actually come to. And I think a lot of you guys, if you pay attention, you probably see that that is already happening in society today. You know, there's certain information that you require that, you know, by just thinking about it or taking certain actions, yeah, you go on the internet and you will find that that information is almost chasing you around. You're interested in a particular product. Maybe you exchange an email with someone or you type and search it, and you find a different variation of that product will continue to come to you. I think that's where information is going with digital revolution. And that's the kind of thing that is possible with digital revolution. And it is important for leaders to be aware of the depth and the diversity, but also the rate of change of this sort of technology. Because if you look at the outer section of this box, you will see it's not very clear. But what this is saying is that digital revolution, because of its uniqueness and features, can permeate every aspect of society. It can affect education deeply because it changes the way we educate. And I think a lot of us can attest to this today. For those who are parents on the call, for those who are students, you know, for those who are school administrators, you can see just what COVID-19 has done to the education system and how much technology is being taken into the education system today. You know, for those in healthcare, for instance, you can also attest to this. Our technology and digital revolution is really changing how healthcare delivery is done, but also changing things like how we do surveillance and detection of diseases. You know, before, if there's a pandemic, there used to be very manual approaches to being able to track and trace things. But with digital revolution, this is totally changing. You can find the same thing in energy, you can find it in transportation, you can find it in agriculture. So the implication of this is that what we think is the future is actually today. So for anyone who is leading in any aspect of society, if you don't pay attention to the changes that digital revolution is bringing to our world, you're probably not going to be at par, and your competitiveness as an organization that, you know, as a leader that is leading an organization, or even as an employee, is going to be really, really limited, you know, because your ability to do what you do well, it's going to be influenced by digital revolution. If you look back into probably 10, 15 years ago, there were so many career paths and professions where for you to be top-notch, you must have studied, you probably need a PhD, you must have 10, 15 years work experience. But if you work with a lot of the young people today, you will find that knowledge has been democratized so badly that barrier to entry into quite a number of industries is now really low. is really low because the knowledge is out there. The only thing that separates people today is something that is called creative confidence. Your ability to believe that you can create something that can be useful for society or for business is now more important than actually what you know. Because if you have creative confidence, knowledge is there. Your challenge will be, can you apply your creativity to absorb and apply that knowledge in such a way that it can add value to society? You know, this is now the challenge. If you look around us in Africa, for those who are innovation inclined, you'll find that a lot of the problems that we face in our society in a place like Nigeria, they're not rocket science. And if you look deep, the solution to them exists somewhere. And if you use the digital tools that you have very well, you can actually be that person who can bring that solution that is already somewhere out there and apply it to solve the problem in our own society. The only thing that is going to differentiate you, however, it's not going to be how much you know necessarily, but your ability to take that knowledge, apply it within context. That's going to be the challenge. And sometimes knowledge is not what you need in application. Knowledge is absolutely important. If you don't have the foundation, you can't apply. But even if you have that foundation, if you don't have the ability to create and apply to be able to engage people, it becomes a serious issue. And this is what digital revolution is bringing to the table, lowering the barrier to entry for professionals, but also in competition as well. Knowledge that used to be your source of competitiveness is also gone out of the window. And this is what's going to take me to my last slide before I open it up to conversation. And this is more for those who are running organizations. I'm sure a lot of us have been attending webinars where people have been speaking to us about how COVID-19 is going to bring about digital transformation. And that's true. You've probably been seeing a lot of this digital transformation out there, you know. So I've decided to still talk about, you know, 3 things that I think are important. But also there's then one thing that you would hardly find people talk about. And for me, I think this is what's going to set leaders apart. So the first 3 things are typically, you know, when you go into these webinars, 3 things that people will tell you to pay attention to is one is the technology you use in your organization, that your ability to transform yourself to stay competitive is actually going to be tied to how well you use technology, how much data you gather, and how you use the data that you gather, but also the operation model as well, because the way society has been consuming services and goods, probably in the last 6 months, all of us can attest to it, that it's changed tremendously. Even church had to change, right? The way we attend church in the last 6 months is changed tremendously. So you can imagine any church or any organization that is not critically look at how do we use technology, how do we collect data on our members, and how do we even serve them by knowing them better. But most importantly, what part of our operations we use technology to run. Imagine what that would have been for such a church. And you can apply the same to any organization. It is absolutely important, right? This is one of the things that if you've attended webinars, you must have heard enough of this. And it's important, we all need to do it. But the second bit is something that is called the business model as well. The way you use to serve your customer, the way you monetize your product, all those things as well would have to change, because COVID-19 is actually forced digital transformation to become the top of agenda for every organization. And leaders will tell you this, there's been enough messages, enough books to read, enough articles on how you need to rethink your business model at a time like this. A lot of businesses have died because, you know, the whole business model that was applied up until January, February this year is no longer relevant today. So another fact there that you need to rethink your business model and see what digital technology can do in that frame. And the third thing that you will hear, which is probably common that everybody can relate with, is your organization. How is your organization structured? And what role is digital technology playing today? And for you to survive, you need to consider digital transformation. The very clear one in this is work from home, right? Probably a lot of the people on the call have been working from home. I work with about 80 people. And for the last 6 months, we've been working from home. You know, people from Lagos to Abuja to Ijebu-Ode to Kigali to Nairobi to the UK. You know, we've all been working from home for the last 6 months. So this is another thing that we need to take into consideration that people have been talking a lot about. But there's one more thing that I bring to the table that I think is going to separate good leaders from those who are coasting or from those who are consuming this knowledge without paying attention to their society. And that one thing is social infrastructure. You know, it's very controversial because a lot of people will not understand this. But if you look deep, so social infrastructure by definition, it's really those infrastructure that as humans, we all need to survive. So if I start to give an example, for instance, a church is a social infrastructure because people think most of the time that everyone in church, that we go there to worship only. But church is also where some of us go to socialize. So church is where we go for hope. Some people go to church to even find food on Sunday. You know, so what we get from church is so integral to everything we do. And it's the same with mosque for those that are Muslim. It's so integral to us as humans that, you know, if you take church out of the loop, a part of us is going to be missing. Even if you attend church on Instagram or Zoom, it's not going to be complete because that other part of us is missing. So as a leader, for instance, it is extremely important that we start to think, what's the role of our organization to people that we serve beyond the business? So if I take another example, shopping malls, for instance, you know, is a social infrastructure. Schools are social infrastructure. Bars where people go for drinks, coffee shops, social infrastructure. If you start to think of it that way, even most of the time, your business is social infrastructure. My business is social infrastructure. For a lot of leaders, you think a bank is social infrastructure. People don't think of it that way. For a lot of leaders, you think your business is about selling product to people. A lot of the time, what you sell is much more than the product you're selling. The structure you've built around it, the physical element of it is social infrastructure. And what has happened to social infrastructure across the world in the last 6 months is that COVID-19 is disrupted and destroyed it significantly. You know, so when people talk about COVID-19 in line with digital transformation or the digital era, what you find people focus on is only the opportunity for us to transform and transition certain things online. But a lot of people don't focus on how such situation is also destroying society. It is actually destroying society. I'm a very big technology person, as you may know. But at the same time, when I look at technology, I look at the good and the bad side of it. And what I think separates the good leaders from the bad is their ability, even in technology, is their ability to always connect the role of technology, the use of technology to humanity, the ability to connect it to society. So I think if you live with anything today as a leader, what I would like to leave you with, you know, is the fact that as you think of how COVID-19 and the current situation is forcing those who perhaps have not even paid attention to the digital era and digital transformation to adopt and use technology, that you critically assess your business and you say to yourself, which element of my business is social infrastructure? Because your ability to identify these would determine whether you can serve your customers better. Your ability to identify these would determine whether you can serve your employees better. You know, I'll give an example. We've been locked down at CCO for the last 6 months, but this coming Monday, we're going to open up some of the floors at CCO just for our employees. And the reason why we took that decision wasn't because we couldn't be working from home, but we realized that some of the junior staff, that home is actually not conducive for them to work every day of the year. I'm sure that will surprise a lot of people, perhaps maybe not in Nigeria. In the West, you know, people think work from home is going to change the face of everything. But I've seen people that are struggling from working from home. The home environment doesn't provide a place where they want to be to work all the time. They need to be around colleagues. They need to be around people to get inspired, to interact with people. At work for them is more important than just staying at home and working all the time. You know, and the point I'm making here is not whether people should go back to work. Don't mix it up. The point I'm making here is that as we think of digital transformation as a leader, that we also see our businesses, an element of our businesses that can be classified as social infrastructure. And as we try to apply digital solution, that we apply it in such a way that it doesn't destroy that element, because humans are social animals and we will never stop being such. Our interaction, the social element of our being, is an important aspect of how we function, you know, as human. And that's going to affect how people consume your product. It's going to affect how your staff also deliver the services. And it's also going to affect how people interact with your business. So before you jump on the bandwagon of digital transformation, pay attention to which element of your business is actually a social infrastructure. And how are you going to integrate your digital transformation agenda in line with your social infrastructure agenda? How will technology further enhance your ability to provide services that goes beyond just physical product or mere services to people? You know, how are you going to lead that organization that has strong connection with the people that you serve? I think I'm going to stop here. I've probably used up my time. If there's any questions.
Yes, you have. Thanks a lot. All right. Thanks so much, Bosun, for that enlightening session. I think you've taken us from the world of rethinking our business, rethink your, what technology platforms are available to you, your organizational structure, how do you need to modify it to support the changes going on, and also your business model. You've told us to reflect on these key things, and then is your business a social infrastructure or not? You also need to reflect on that. So we have about 2 questions, exactly what I was looking for. You talked about creative confidence, which I think that's a new word for me too. Somebody said, what are the 3 things I can do to increase my creative confidence? That's the first question, if you take that quickly.
Well, yeah, just briefly, I don't know if I can give you 3 things, but a starting point for nurturing, every one of us, we can be creative, by the way, but it's something that you have to build and nurture, right? So the starting point is always for you not to seek perfection when you think of something that you consider to be a great idea. That is always the starting point, because you have so many people who get in that hole where they have a fantastic idea, but they believe that the idea needs to be perfect before they execute. The best way to train your creative confidence is in the execution of ideas. You know, when you have an idea, find ways to move from just it being an idea or ideation to executing. Don't focus too much on whether it's going to fail or be successful. At times when things fail, it's actually not failing. You're learning from how not to do that particular thing. And you find that if you train your ability to execute, your creative confidence will start to grow. As you execute, it starts to grow. And you will see yourself as a solution provider to the world, really. It's not as difficult as people think.
Absolutely spot on. A lot of us get caught up in that trap of, I don't want to fail. Get at it first and learn from the process. All right, then second question, the person said, education has moved virtual now. I mean, all schools are either on Microsoft Teams or Google Classroom and all that. And then we have our internet infrastructure in Nigeria is still not at it. So someone said, as an education provider, how do you get over this bottleneck and be able to also stand out and your business doesn't go extinct?
It's an important question. I have a strong team in education. And what I tell people is that the pain that the pandemic is bringing to the world is actually being felt more in education, because the gap that we're creating is huge. And as a provider, one thing you need to bear in mind is not all the kids that come to your school will have access to decent connectivity as well. We also live in a world where a lot of our teachers have not been trained to be able to actually deliver efficiently online. This is the truth about the world that we live, especially in Africa. And so if people tell you that education is going to totally move online, I personally don't think so. And this is based on fact, because we work with a lot of teachers. I think what you need to be focusing on as a proprietor or a leader of a school is, a light integration. What kind of low technology can you use that would help improve personalization? Because that's one bit you will not be able to fight against. A lot of the kids are now being exposed to learning online, that by the time they come back to school, they'll be dealing with teachers who have no clue how to efficiently use technologies. That's the fact about the problem that you're going to face. So start to find low-tech approach to technology so that you don't cause a major friction between your students and your teachers. But also, most importantly, don't leave your teachers behind. There's a need as a proprietor to focus on enhancing the skills of your teacher. And lastly, for proprietors, don't jump into the adoption of technology. Find people who understand technology. Let them help you do a proper health check of your organization to see where the low-hanging opportunities are for the use of technology. Technology can be a problem. A lot of schools are being hacked today. You know, people do sessions online where people hack into that session. It's happening in the West as well. So if you jump into it without properly planning for it, it will cause a bigger problem. So you can't avoid it, but you have to go into it with a proper plan.
Thanks a whole lot, Bosun. Thanks a whole lot. Very enlightening, very informative. You certainly improved and increased our knowledge of how to manage our businesses, our job in the digital era. Thank you again for your time.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
All right.